This is the
Five Stars
Podcast.
Let me talk to you. What do you guys want to talk about?
I think I'm just going to keep that as part of the intro. I don't know, the more I listen to it, it's too good to remove. It's certainly the best troll job Cody's ever done in for promo delivery. It's also a perfect way for me to troll everyone before we start talking about how horrible Dynamite is every week. This show, dude, this week's Dynamite just encapsulated everything I would ever need if I were going to write a book on AEW. The title of the book will be AEW, What Could Have Been. And the cover picture is going to be CM Punk doing a job to Jon Moxley in the middle of the show in 3 minutes to unify their world titles. I can't even say it's WCW level stupidity at this point because that's probably giving AEW too much credit. WCW was not this bad during its dying days. AEW in its current incarnation is literally TNA wrestling circa 2009. A horribly written, illogical, nonsensically booked wrestling show with baffling decisions that just leave you with a massive migraine when it's over. And people, I can assure you one thing. Whether you're listening to me, whether you're listening to Jim Cornette, whether you're listening to any sane, rational-minded wrestling fan out there that doesn't have their heads wedged so far up AEW's rectum they can't think straight, the honeymoon phase is over. Rest assured that after this week's show, I can promise you right here, right now, that the only people that are still continuing to defend this company are the spineless AEW sheep that'll praise this company until the day it dies a slow, painful death. I don't know anybody else that could possibly defend what they did this week. Not a soul. I thought them beating Bryan Danielson on TV to Daniel Garcia was the stupidest booking decision they made all year. Oh, Lord Almighty. Not after this show. No, Tony managed to outdo his baffling stupidity on this one. Wrestling's single worst case of ADHD since the days of Vince Russo booking television, and I'd still probably make the argument that Russo shit was better. I'll say it. Because at least Russo's bad booking had some memorable, laughable moments. Tony Khan, I'm not even ribbing. He may be the worst promoter / booker of all time. I'll go ahead on record and say that right here, right now, and you can document it. Because even though we haven't reached the point where this company's on the verge of going out of business, trust me, the day will come. This company will die. I don't know when, but it'll happen, and it won't be too far off from now. And if you need any further evidence to support my belief, look at the guy running the ship. Look at the guy that's trying to single-handedly run this thing. A weak, gutless, blue-pilled, dorky, left-leaning billionaire with the inability to tell anyone no and show any signs of leadership. It's the worst kind of management you could possibly deal with in any corporate environment. And trust me, when it comes to the big tech platforms and the major corporations, not a single solitary one of those companies are run by rational-minded, strong-willed human beings. Yeah, they have the money. Yeah, they have those high-profile positions, but goddamn are they not among the most incompetent bunches of pea-brains running those companies. Gutless, spineless, left-wing fools. They run everything. Big tech, education, political positions. It's amazing to me. You know, and to me, it's not even strictly a political issue. This is not Republican versus Democrat to me. This is purely a conversation of strong-willed, capable, and competent management versus frail, incapable, and incompetent management. And if you had to pick and choose objectively which one you think Tony describes accurately or depicts accurately, which one do you think it is? Based on all the evidence with how AEW has operated since company inception. And who knows? Maybe Tony isn't a complete left-wing buffoon. But you want to know what a lot of radical left-minded people think about when it comes to the corporate environment? Inclusion, diversity, equity, trying to appease everyone's ego and having zero hierarchical structure or top-down authority of any kind. No one in charge to say, no, this is how things are going to be and we're going to do it this way, and if you don't like it, get the fuck out. How different are those companies from the way Tony operates AEW? Why the hell do you think Bill Watts was such a great promoter? Certainly wasn't by sitting around and saying yes to everyone's dumb ideas or having no backbone and putting people in their place when they tried to overstep their boundaries. Tell me when Tony Khan has ever demonstrated this kind of authority. And you know what? I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm old school and the best teachers I've ever had in my life all breathe that mentality of always pushing me to be the best version of myself, never allowing me to become complacent and telling me when I'm right or wrong and not trying to appease my ego. And thank God I never took those people for granted. You know, I had a great drum teacher in undergrad school that taught me everything I ever needed to know and always pushed me to never settle for mediocrity. Same for my parents, obviously. You know, I had a great series of male teachers in high school that were well educated, and I could assure you do not buy into this indoctrinated 21st century inclusivity, equity, compliance bullshit that all these blue-haired radicals are trying to preach in the public education setting today. I'm just fed up with all of it. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of stupid people running the country. I'm tired of stupid people running a horribly booked wrestling show, and I'm tired of stupid people supporting the stupid bullshit. All I ever wanted out of AEW was one simple thing. Give me a consistent, serious, professional wrestling alternative. Give me Mid-South Wrestling circa 1982 to 1985. Give me NWA World Championship Wrestling circa 1986. Give me world-class wrestling circa 1983. Hell, I'll even take some of the mid-90s NWO stuff with Sting in the Rafters and Hogan, Nash, and Hall running roughshod on the WCW roster, because at least that shit was exciting. At least that was must-see television back in the day. This AEW all-inclusive booking where there's no roster structure, there's no hierarchy of top guys or undercard guys, everyone's on an even playing field, they all wrestle the same way, they're treated the same way, it's a bunch of modernized, corporatized garbage. And I know even Jim Cornette would admit to some of this stuff because he's still plugged into thinking CNN is real news. You know, here I sit, having almost completely contrasting political beliefs to someone like a Jim Cornette, and more often than not, when it comes to the professional wrestling business, and we end up agreeing on a whole hell of a lot more than you'd think. We both want serious companies. We both want a wrestling product run by someone with a backbone, someone with leadership qualities, someone with an actual vision and good mind for the business. You know, it's a fucking Mark in his basement who played with action figures and video games growing up and Now he thinks he's capable of applying the same fantasy booking to a real product. Doesn't work that way, genius. If you haven't already figured that out. It's why I refuse to listen to Dave Meltzer's show anymore. It's just another CNN coverage of wrestling. It's refusing to call out what's really going on and trying to blanket everything with artificially contrived positive outlooks. I'm more so on the bandwagon of, if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, newsflash, dumb fucks, it's probably a goddamn duck. And I'm solely an opinion podcaster. I don't get paid for this. I do this for free because I enjoy talking about wrestling. I also enjoy laughing at stupid wrestling, which is why I watch AEW every week. But this show, man, this one did a number on me. And before I tell you how I really felt about this show, let me do this real quick. This is the 5 Starr Wrestling Report channel. Subscribe, like the show, comment, follow me on Mondays and Fridays for new content, either here or on Rumble. Please and thank you. If you don't, whatever. I don't give a fuck. But for those of you that do come back to watch, thank you. The support is greatly appreciated. I can assure you this right now. For as long as I'm on here doing this, I'm not going to sugarcoat my opinions. I'm not going to give you a sunshine and unicorn review like a lot of these other jabroni podcasters do with millions of viewers, and they're all compliant sheet that agree with virtually everything they say. I'm more of a give it to you straight kind of guy because we like rationality and objectivism on this channel. Not the, well, we'll just see how it plays out. Because trust me, I've been doing that with AEW for well over 3 years now, and the wait to see how things pan out has not really worked well in their favor. If you already can't tell that. Oh, Tony. What's a boy to do? God, this show. It's just... Well, we'll get into that segment in a while. My actual TV review is going to seem a lot shorter, and, well, you'll find out why once we get there. By the way, I wanted to note this before we even got into the segments. I like how JR is just now back to doing commentary for the whole show instead of just having him come out for hour 2. I don't know. It seemed like he was much happier only having to call 1 hour of this wretched program, but I guess somehow Tony talked him back into doing commentary for the full show. Poor guy. Maybe got a bonus pay, who knows. So we began with the exact kind of thing that you would want to do if you were trying to hook in viewers and keep the holdovers from the previous program. They start the show with Daniel Garcia. Hell yeah. That'll keep those ratings up. I can't think of anyone better to start off a wrestling program than the black hole of charisma that is Daniel Garcia. And even better, they gave him a live mic. My God, dude. I could just see those casual viewers popping in by the thousands as we speak. Just foaming at the mouth to hear what Daniel Garcia has to say on live national television. Anyway, long story short here, because there really wasn't a whole lot to say about this initial exchange, Chris Jericho is basically telling Garcia that he better choose between being a sports entertainer or a pro wrestler. It's campy as fuck. No one actually believes this in any way. And Garcia did speak here. It sounded like he was auditioning for a goddamn Neil Breen movie, and the acting was so abysmal. Said something about how people were raving about the Danielson-Garcia match from last week being the best match in Dynamite history. Bullshit. And finally out came Bryan Danielson in his single wardrobe attire. If Danielson has ever worn anything on the show except a plain white t-shirt, please send me a link in the comment section because I would love to see it. And they did some more bad acting here. The conclusion was Garcia said he's not going to make his decision now, and the suspense continues, I guess. So now we just wait and see him turn on Bryan Danielson at the pay-per-view so Danielson can do yet another job on the show. And just so we're clear on this whole charade, the story is that Daniel Garcia has to decide what title to artificially give himself instead of, just picking between aligning with either Jericho or Danielson. Now tie that in with the fact that it's fucking Daniel Garcia and you realize nobody could possibly care. Omit the AEW marks. And I kind of alluded to it just a second ago, but the segment did turn to focus on Jericho and Danielson, and they went back and forth for a while. Jericho says he knows more about professional wrestling than Danielson does. He was the last survivor of the Hart Dungeon, blah, blah. Again, more bullshit revisionist history. Danielson says that if so-and-so were here in the room right now, who would they pick between him and Jericho as the best wrestler in the world? There was actually a part in here where Danielson almost had a Freudian slip and referred to himself as Daniel Bryan, but he caught himself. Anyway, they are going to indeed wrestle at the pay-per-view for some reason. I mean, fine. I'm kind of over the whole Danielson thing at this stage, and I've said it before, Jericho hasn't done a whole lot for me in a long time with AEW. I'm more so curious why we're supposed to care about Jericho wrestling Danielson on pay-per-view when he literally just did a job to Jon Moxley on TV 2 weeks ago. And by the way, going back to the whole sports entertainer, pro wrestler thing for a minute here, these people are aware that Vince is no longer in charge of overseeing the WWE, right? They know that Hunter is trying to revert back to the formula of letting guys actually use the term wrestler and wrestling on television, right? Like, didn't Drew McIntyre literally just do a segment on TV where he kept shouting the forbidden wrestling term? So what the hell is the story with this whole thing? That AEW is the wrestling-based product while WWE is the sports entertainment-based product? Oh, the irony. How it makes me laugh. So then we went to Dax Harwood versus Jay Lethal. I guess this was Tony's "let's throw a bone to the old school fans to make it seem like we're actually serious about pushing real athletes with actual talent" segment. It was a good match. I had nothing negative to say about the work from either guy. I wish both of them had been booked like dog shit on this show for the entirety of 2022. Elsewise, I might have been more excited about it. And, that's an important part of the business that I think a lot of people forget about, especially the more hardcore fan base. Of course, they see the names Dax Harwood and Jay Lethal and immediately assume the match is going to be good. It's a no-brainer. The problem, though, is that when they're both booked like mid-card guys who appear on the show very infrequently and aren't integral parts of the weekly programming, how eager can you really get about a match like this? It was fun. I enjoyed the wrestling, but what does it mean at the end of the day? FTR have been completely wasted on AEW television. Their 2 matches with the Briscoes are among the best matches of the entire year, and neither of those matches took place on AEW branded pay-per-views. Jay Lethal, the guy's booking kind of speaks for itself. His entire AEW run has been botched from the start. And, the thing with FTR is that the one key feud on AEW right now that actually makes some story sense, they could do the rubber match with them and the Beta Bucks with them going over, but of course the Bucks don't want to do another job for FTR, hence we're not getting that match. And the Bucks are now mingling in their little sandbox with their playmates in the corner while FTR continue to get over and actually gain momentum with the fans. As far as the post-match deal with Sanjay's semi-botched promo to hype up the 6-man for the pay-per-view, well, first of all, and I could totally be wrong about this, but I'm like, 85% certain that the name Wardlow was never actually mentioned or uttered once from Sanjay in this promo. So I think the match is Wardlow teaming with FTR to face Jay Lethal and the two partners they revealed in this promo package, the close friends of Sanjay and Lethal. I was optimistically crossing my fingers that it would have been the Briscoes, considering their history with FTR, and I think they're close friends with Jay Lethal. I mean, they worked together in Ring of Honor for a period of time. Instead, it was the Motor City Machine Guns, which, okay. You know, I always enjoyed Chris Sabin and Alex Shelley in TNA as a team. I remember they had a really good series of matches with Beer Money at one point when they were Bobby Roode and James Storm. I know Sabin's been in Impact for a while now. I haven't heard all that much about Shelley. I thought he was doing more freelance work in Japan over the last few years, but I mean, it should be a good match. The only problem I have with it is, why exactly do we need to involve another set of guys that we've never seen on AEW programming when you've already got a roster closing out in the fucking quadruple digits? You know, wouldn't it be more productive for Lethal to try and team with an established heel team on the show and try to get their current roster over, instead of yet again involving guys from outside promotions that aren't going to be sticking around after the pay-per-view? I guess that would also imply that Tony is actually trying to get guys in his roster over, and, well, we all know that's a bunch of corporatized BS. So as this company continues to crumble and deteriorate into the depths of obscurity, guess who's injured now? Yup, you guessed it. Thunder Rosa. The best goddamn female worker they have on TV. At least it's currently being pushed right now. She's now on the injured list for something. I have no idea what. She never said. She just said that she had to relinquish the Women's World title due to injury, and now there will be, guess, didn't see this coming, another fucking interim champion. This time taking the place of Rosa, which will now be determined at the pay-per-view. Because Tony Khan is so limp dick, he doesn't even have the balls to just strip people of the belts on this show when they can't compete or defend them, up to and including the women. He has to once again overcomplicate things to a ridiculous degree and muddy the waters with trying to have interim champions. And by the way, on the subject of that promo, it was a goddamn great promo. Probably because it was an actual heartfelt speech where Rosa didn't have to recite any pre-thought-out verbiage. I mean, she was legitimately devastated to have to break this news publicly, and while the injury itself sucks, the promo was fantastic. I absolutely hate the idea of them doing another interim champion when, A, they just did it with their top men's division, and B, it just makes more sense to strip Rosa the belt altogether because she can't fulfill her duties as champion. Like, really, I want to know, why is it hard for Tony to just strip Rosa of the belt? I mean, we've already established he just doesn't have the brass to strip anyone of titles, but why? Because it's mean? God, this guy, he's just such a... He's a puss. He's a puss. Legitimately. Like, I could not be friends with that guy. I wouldn't be able to stand in a room with him for more than 5 minutes. We're two polar opposite personalities. Thank Christ almighty I never have to engage with him. So, yeah. Sorry, I hope I didn't peak the mic there. I just kind of went into a fitting rage for a split second there, but it appears that we are going to be dealing with another case of two people walking around with the same belt until they decide to do the blow-off later down the road. I guess that also implies that Thunder Rosa will be on the television show, even though she won't be able to wrestle. I don't know what they're going to do. Obviously, I wish all the best to her. Hopefully she's not out that long. Hopefully it's a very quick road to recovery. But yet again, another injury racked up. Because none of these people know how to safely work. I mean, you'd think you'd be able to put two and two together at some point and say, maybe this 24/7 high-risk offensive style isn't going to bode well for our health in the long term, so maybe we ought to slow things down and learn how to actually work like real professional wrestlers. You would think. But that would imply that anyone in this business thinks rationally these days, which no one does. It's all emotional thinking. The worst kind of thinking imaginable. Then Billy Gunn wrestled one of his sons. I think it was Colton. Don't really know, don't really care. It's an actual father versus son story they're doing in AEW. Probably the first one they've ever done, which, I mean, in this company, there aren't too many of those to begin with. So, of course, it's a free match on TV in the middle of the show, given about 5 minutes and some change. Way to go, guys. Didn't even build it up a week in advance. And the finish saw Colton win with the small package after lowballing Papa Billy with some outside chicanery going on. That was followed with the evident afterbirth attack, because got to have one of those virtually every week on the show after every match. And as soon as Swerve Strickland and Keith Lee ran out for the save, it hit me right then and there. I had completely forgotten those guys were the AEW Tag Team Champions. And moreover, not only did I not know they were the champions, it never crossed my mind at any point in the last several weeks. We've seen so many dudes walking around with belts on this show for God knows how long now. I had just assumed that Keith and Swerve were carrying around belts from God knows where, fucking Outlaw Bar Association in Tits McGee, New Jersey. So, yeah, they're the champions. I guess they're going to be feuding with the Gunn Sons now. Wow. What a captivating program. Britt Baker had a match with Kylan King, who I guess is going to be a regular on AEW now. She was literally just working NWA tapings in the last month, and now she's just randomly showing up on Dynamite every week. Either that or she's Tony Khan's new play toy until he gets bored with her and moves on to somebody else like he always does. And I like Kylan King, for the record. Have plenty of good things to say about her based on her work in the NWA. She's a solid talent, got a lot of upside. She's been very serious with everything she's done. And if she is somebody that Tony wants to try and push on television, I'd be all for it. You know, at least it's a young girl that I've actually watched and seen a modicum of improvement from. Can't say the same with a lot of the other girls on the roster. The biggest set of heat in this match was the fans chanting "Pittsburgh sucks," which, I don't know, I guess because they were in Cleveland and because their football team is the drizzling fucking shits, they're all butthurt that our football team is better than theirs. I don't know. I don't care. I don't watch sports. The point is, the fans did not care about anything the girls did in the match. It was fine. Britt Baker, though, I don't know anymore. I'm going to be honest. I've kind of been over Britt since the whole cage match debacle with Thunder Rosa months back. You know, where they decided to just try and replicate the Magnum TA Tully Blanchard bloodbath at Starrcade 85 without actually having the backstory or the intrigue of seeing it. That and the fact that they're girls, and I'm generally against seeing women bleed in wrestling, especially when it's worked. But based on the setup for this all-out title match, I think they're doing some kind of multi-person match to determine a champion or something. I know Britt's one of the girls in the match. I think the other two are Toni Storm and Hikaru Shida. If there's another girl, I completely zoned out with who it was. But as soon as I saw Hikaru Shida run out the end of the segment, I was like, Wait, she still exists? When's the last time Sheeta was even on the show? And she's part of the pay-per-view match to determine an interim champion? What about Ember Moon, or whatever her name is now? Athena? What about her? Or, I don't know, Serena Deeb? Mercedes Martinez? Girls that we actually might give a shit about? I mean, all evidence points to Britt winning at this stage, but I don't know. If Tony's in there too, it's probably about high time they do something constructive with her, since she's been a complete non-factor in AEW since she showed up. Britt, on the other hand, I'm about over her. Nothing against her. You know, she's a talented performer, good personality, but she's kind of run her course as the champion. You know, getting the belt off of her was probably the best thing AEW did with her the entire year, and the thought of her winning it back, nah, I'll pass. You got other girls you need to try and elevate into that spot. You know, Britt's just another back to the well case when it's not needed. But then we had the match. At the top of the hour, not even the main event, but the top of hour 2, audio issues and mic peaks galore, it's the all-out pay-per-view main event. The Jiffy Lube attendant versus CM Punk to crown the officially recognized AEW World Champion. And it was certainly the main event for me, because after this debacle of a segment, I stopped watching the show. It was a first in a long time, but when I watched this unfold on the show, live as it happened, saw what they did, and as soon as I saw that hand come down, the moment Paul Turner hit that mat for the 3, I tapped. I said, I'm done. I can take no more. And nothing else they do on this show is going to make up for this absolute abortion of a booking catastrophe. We'll just get to the finish here and kind of work our way backwards from there. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, you did not mishear or misinterpret that segment in any way. They indeed squashed, for lack of better terms, CM Punk. They went out, the bell rang, and approximately 3 minutes and some odd seconds later, the finish saw CM Punk lose clean to Jon Moxley in the middle of the ring via Death Rider. I couldn't believe my eyes. They booked their top star at the top of the hour and had him lose the AEW World Championship match in 3 minutes to the oil mechanic. I felt like Kramer on Seinfeld when they realized that Poppy peed on Jerry's sofa. The part in the skit where Kramer walks up and sees the stain on the couch and he just goes, "Ugh." That was my exact reaction to this. Words. Oh, the words. How there are so many of them, and how few ways I can currently put them into sentences. Well, first off, why don't we just start with the obvious? Why? Seriously, why do this? Was it for the shock factor? Was it because we wouldn't see it coming? Or is this just some mastermind genius plan that Tony Khan has constructed that only makes sense to him and maybe a handful of the AEW diehards? I mean, I know I used this analogy before, but just for reference, I'll use it here too. I could also walk to the middle of the ring, pull my pants down, and take a massive dump in the middle of the ring pull my pants up and walk backstage certainly would be shocking. People certainly would not see it coming. But does it necessarily mean it's a good idea? Because I can assure you one thing. I've read the reports. I've seen some of the comments on videos. Even the AEW diehards are questioning this one. I mean, let's not even get into the whole discussion of why you would give away a pay-per-view caliber match like this on free TV literally just 2 weeks before an actual pay-per-view. And that's some WCW bullshit right there. We've been over that 1,000 times. But I'd argue that this was even stupider because if you were going to do this, why would you beat Punk in this manner? You do understand that this is the kind of booking you do when a guy is leaving a territory, right? Or at the very least, the way you write somebody off of television for an extended period of time. At least 8 months to a year. And even then, you probably have to bring the guy back under a mask for a period of time. If you wanted to get the belt off of Punk for whatever reason, fine. But for the love of God, unless the guy is actually leaving the company and not coming back, this was the worst possible way to book the guy to lose the belt. Because that brings us to even the bigger problem with this whole debacle of a segment. You know what it is, right? Punk sold the wrong fucking foot. Am I the only one who saw that? I can't be the only one. Good God, I hope I'm not the only one. Seriously, if you don't believe me, go back and watch the match. It's only 3 minutes. The whole match was collar and elbow tie-up from both guys, a couple stiff forearms and hard blows to the opposing corners. Punk hits a roundhouse kick to Moxley's head and immediately goes down selling the foot, and then Mox takes advantage and then hits him with a series of Death Riders to pin him. But the problem is that Punk hit Mox with the right kick to the head, and then he sold the left foot. And I was like, what the fuck? Did he just subconsciously forget which foot he was supposed to kick Mox with? Was he ribbing on purpose? That was the most baffling part of the segment to me. Mox going over and beating Punk in 3 minutes, yeah, that was stupid. But the fact that CM Punk sold the wrong foot? Dude, that was a major fucking gaffe. And I even left a comment on AEW's YouTube video of it, because they played the entirety of the match. And I watched it again. I'm like, yup, motherfucker sold the wrong foot. Now that, make all the WCW jokes you want, but that right there, that is some WCW shit. My God. My God. You cannot make this stuff up, folks. Maybe that was Punk going into business for himself. You know, people have been talking about Punk going off script with his promo material lately, which is a stupid statement because nothing on this show is actually scripted. Hence why most guys can't talk a fucking lick to begin with and nothing ever makes sense from week to week. But nevertheless, look, obviously we don't know the full story of what's going on behind the scenes in AEW. You know, the whole locker room turmoil stories you've been seeing circulating, but allow for me to provide some wisdom or insight to any of you out there that would actually like to hear it. There's a reason why WCW's formula of blurring the lines between fake and reality did not bode well for that company in the long term. When you go so far of trying to work the boys in the company, not just the fans, but the actual employees that you have under contract in your company, and you're not providing context and you're not keeping them in touch with what your plans are, that is obviously going to create a lot of tension and turmoil. We've seen this play out. We know how this story ends. And all it does is create more division and uncertainty. AEW's biggest problem is the week-to-week nonsensical booking on this show where you don't know what's going on, everything is left up to interpretation, and it starts to become an issue where you start asking, what the hell is actually more important at this stage? The stuff that we're seeing presented on the TV show, or the behind-the-scenes drama that only the minority of people care about? Is that your plan, Tony? To create a wrestling promotion that is so geared toward the lowest common denominator that everyone else is left in the dark wondering what is going on? I want to know how this is conducive to operating a long-standing, growing business. And now you've even got the hardcores questioning your decisions. Because as I stated earlier, the honeymoon phase is long gone with this company. It's time to grow up and start figuring out what this product is actually supposed to represent. Not just for your overall audience that watches the show week to week, but the people you got working in your own company. You're not always going to have everyone on the same page 100% of the time, but you can easily get on board with getting good company morale if you have a business model that everybody can agree on. Something that'll actually grow your product. You can get people behind that. People might have their different interpretations of how to get there, but if you have one goal in mind that everybody can agree on is a good idea, that is when you know you have a good business model. But when you actively go out of your way to create division and uncertainty in the locker room, all it's going to do is spiral even more out of control. And we've seen it with WCW, we've seen it with TNA, and we're seeing it unfold in real time right now with AEW. And WWE is gaining more leverage and more traction every week with Vince out of the picture now. And once we start hearing rumors that guys wanted to jump ship once contracts are up with AEW, that's going to be the point where Tony's going to have to hit the panic button. Because if he loses Punk or he loses MJF, all hope is lost for this company. You know, Cody Rhodes doesn't look so crazy now, does he? He saw the writing on the wall back in January, and now we're closing in on the fall of 2022, and these problems are only going to escalate from here. So again, I tapped out on this show after that segment. I didn't need to see any more. I saw enough, and nothing else on that show was worth my time investing in, including the Trios main event, which was the last thing I needed to see on the show, was more superfluous stunt show routines. Right now, I am trying to give Tony Khan some honest insight as a fan. Someone that probably would view himself more as a casual AEW viewer at this stage, because like a handful of others, I don't watch the YouTube shows. I don't watch the indies. I don't spend 24 hours a day reading dirt sheets and getting inside scoops on what's going on with the behind-the-scenes parts of the product. I don't care. I watch the weekly show, I review what I see, and I provide perspective based on my 20-something years of watching this sport. I know what I like, I know what I don't like, and the steam that AEW had during that MJF Punk storyline earlier in the year, or the MJF Wardlow feud, that shit ain't here right now. So, they got one more week to do anything to get me remotely interested in that pay-per-view on the 4th of September. And after what I just saw them do with CM Punk here, basically cutting his balls out from under him, not a good sign. All right then, so that'll take us to NWA World Championship Wrestling. This would be August 23rd, 1986. Shorter show this week, by the way. Runtime for the episode was a little over 42 minutes, which I think may be one of the shortest studio programs we reviewed thus far. I mean, we definitely reviewed hour-long shows, but 42 minutes. Yeah, that kind of felt like a regular episode of World Class, because those shows usually run about the same length. Obviously not taking into account commercials. But we begin with footage of a Flair Dusty match. Probably a regular house show event, because the two matches we've seen them in thus far, they left him with a cliffhanger. And this one, it is being called by Bob Caudle, and I'm not sure who the second guy was. He didn't sound familiar, but I know one of them was Caudle for sure. But the video teaser is Flair holding Dusty in the figure four, and there is a spot where Dusty is trying to turn over Flair, but right before they cut to the opening graphics, we see Baby Doll grab a hold of Flair's wrist and essentially pull him back to a stationary position. The cliffhanger was the freeze frame where we see Baby Doll grabbing Flair's wrist, but they don't actually show the rest of it. And of course, we found out moments later on, when they cut back to Tony and Schiavone and David Crockett at the booth, yes, Baby Doll, the longtime personal for the American Dream Dusty Rhodes, has turned a new leaf. She is now a heel. That no good Jezebel. I always knew that woman couldn't be trusted. My instincts were right. I always knew she couldn't stay away from the bad boys. This is why men always lose with women in the end. Because they try to be the nice guy and it always blows up in their face. You get stabbed in the back, just like poor old Dusty did. Plus, with the betterment of hindsight, I also know my late 80s NWA history pretty well, so there's that to take into account. And of course, the best part of this whole thing is that while David and Tony are explaining this new turn of events and Baby Doll aligning with the Four Horsemen, they are not distraught about the situation. They're not angry about it. They're just peachy as all get out as they welcome us to the show and start running down the card for the program. They were actually happier about the fact that we also have new World Tag Team Champions. That's right, fuck Dusty Rhodes. The Rock and Roll Express won the straps back from the Midnight Express. Now it's time to celebrate. So, of course, in walks the top star of 1986, Jim Cornette, spouting off a million different things here in the course of about 30 seconds. Something about a signed cage match in the Omni with Dusty and Big Bubba. And he always said that he could explain he said that he would explain what happened in the tag title match with the Midnights and the Rock and Roll later on. Because there is a conspiracy theory that he is about to break down. So then we cut to the opening match. The Rock and Roll Express versus the team of Mike Rose and Phil Brown. Flaunting their newly won belts to all the fans here. And this may have been the greatest David Crockett moment in the history of studio wrestling, because you got Cornette there talking about the travesty of his boys losing the belts. All the while, Crockett just butts in at the end while Cornette's trying to do a heel promo, totally babyfacing the whole thing. Double drop kick, your winners, the new World Tag Team Champions, the Rock and Roll Express. Just not even let Corny getting a word in edgewise. Fucking classic. And of course, Ricky and Robert did their little post-match celebration speech. It was also during this promo where I realized just how hairy Robert Gibson was. It wasn't as noticeably disgusting as Dirty Dutch or even Jerry Lawler, but yeah, that close-up visual of Robert's body hair, no bueno. But they talked about how all they needed was the Midnights to sign on the dotted line, and they knew as soon as they got their 2-on-2 fair fight, they'd get the job done. And it was a promo. The other notable thing here was the young lady in the front row sporting the full Ricky Morton getup, including the mullet. I think it's fair to say you had to be a pretty big Ricky Morton fan back in the day if you were a female trying to sport the mullet look. Most men never looked good with that hairstyle in the 80s and 90s, much less a woman trying to sport it. So now comes the moment on the FSWR channel where I would like every single solitary person watching to admonish me and rake me over the coals for what I'm about to say. I forgot my history. I've said probably a handful of times now on this show that my memory of the Best of 7 series with Magnum and Nikita for the U.S. Heavyweight title resulted in Magnum winning the series at the end. I was wrong. Dead ass wrong. It was actually Nikita that won the series in the end. So I apologize up front for coming on here and completely forgetting about how this series concluded. For some reason, I just had it ingrained in my mind that Magnum was the one that went over in the series. But, well, now that I'm revisiting it in 2022, I've come to learn that my historical knowledge is not as accurate as I thought it was. So they played the footage of the final match in the series, and fuck, what a roller coaster ride this was. It starts with a shot of Magnum going for the pin on Nikita, but Ivan reaches into the ring and pulls Magnum out by his hair. So it is at this point where Magnum says, "All right, motherfucker," and he picks Ivan up and spikes him on the floor with a pile driver. At that point, getting back into the ring, he ends up hitting the belly-to-belly on Nikita for the visual pin, but Tommy Young is dealing with Crusher Khrushchev on the apron, which then prompts Magnum to walk over and pull Khrushchev over Tommy Young's head and into the ring. I have no idea what the hell Tommy Young was thinking here, other than, I am determined with all my strength and might to keep this 240-pound thug out of the ring. Well, his plan failed, because Crusher ended up getting dumped in the ring anyway, and he essentially took out Young in the process. And of course, with the ref down, Nikita clocks Magnum over the head with the chain, and he manages to steal the pin and win the strap. Now, of course, as I read this bullet point by bullet point, you are probably thinking to yourself right now, well, what was so special about it? It was a regular NWA title match with a fucked finish. How many times have we already seen that? And normally you would be correct. However, you have to go out of your way to watch the highlights of this, if for no other reason than to hear David Crockett calling it. This man, I can't even begin to describe David's reaction calling this live, other than panic and hysteria. The spot where Magnum hit Nikita with the belly-to-belly and had the pin behind the ref's back, David's reaction to this was similar to something you would probably see if you witnessed your dog getting run over in the street. This man screamed and passionately pleaded with every fiber of his being for Tommy Young to turn around and make that fucking pinfall count. I am fully convinced that David would have given himself a seizure to try and get the ref's attention if he could. And the dude practically had a hernia. And of course, the spot where Nikita hits Magnum with a chain, David is sitting there on commentary saying, and this is almost a direct quote, "No, Tommy, no! He hit him with the chain! No!" And after Young counts to 3, Tony Schiavone's reaction is simply, "Oh no." And David's sitting there going, "No! Tell me it ain't so! It can't be!" I fucking died listening to this. This commentary duo with Tony and David, I don't care what anyone says. Tony and David are my favorite commentary team of all time. I would kill to have David Crockett back in the fold calling wrestling in 2022. Certainly, I'd have him call the NWA ring action. Granted, he probably wouldn't know what is going on in a lot of cases, but the energy alone would be enough to fill that room with excitement. A true treasure that man was. And I don't care what anyone says. Y'all hated David Crockett's commentary back in the day. Piss off. That man was a gem. So as we cut back to the booth with all the Russians, we get their take on the whole matter. Nikita being awesome here with saying that Magnum TA lost all control. And when Khrushchev came down to simply help Ivan to the dressing room after Magnum attacked Ivan on the floor, Magnum forgot about Nikita. And now that Nikita is new USA champion, he's going to scout for some real competition. Perhaps Ronnie Garvin, for example. Then we had Ivan chiming in, saying that he will never forget the pain of being pile-driven on the concrete, courtesy of Magnum, but he promises that Magnum will get his in the end. Ivan is out for revenge, and even if it comes in the form of Nikita or Crusher doing the job for him, he will get his revenge. I love that, by the way. I am going to make you pay for what you did, and even if I have to have the boys do the deed for me, because I'm too afraid to get in the ring and do it myself, mark my words, you will pay. Great cowardly heel stuff. And then he also plugged the upcoming Nikita-Ronnie match in the Omni for the U.S. belt. And Crusher, unfortunately, got some rather blasé dialogue in here, too. He told Dusty to grab his Road Warriors and defend the six-man straps against the Russians. That's literally it. Then we had Ole, Arn, and Tully in a six-man against three job guys who I did not even bother writing down. I know two of them were Bill Tabb and Clement Fields, and the only reason I knew Clement Fields was involved was that Cornette was totally burying him on commentary. Cornette was actually pretty on fire this whole segment. You get the announcers running down the Magnum Nikita match again and talking about how they were ringside, seeing how everything unfolded. And Cornette's retort is him saying, there were a lot of people ringside. Place was sold out. I laughed. There's also a part in this match where Cornette notes that J.J. Dillon is on the floor holding onto ordinary wrist tape for no other purpose than to ensure that if his men were to get injured, he could be of assistance in healing them up. But of course. Aside from that, the ring action consisted of the following. Constant tags in and out from the Horsemen, and Arn won the match by hitting the Gourd Buster. But now it is time for the Lifetime movie segment of the television program. The drama of the Dusty Rhodes Baby Doll fallout. And David Crockett is just beside himself. For the life of him, he cannot wrap his brain around the idea that Baby Doll would turn her back on Dusty after everything that Dusty just went through. He was at the peak of the mountain as the world champion, but then he lost the belt back to Flair. He was injured with a chair, courtesy of Tully. He's at the bottom of the barrel as far as his career is concerned right now. And now Baby Doll, for lack of better terms, has leveled up to the real winners. The men that now hold all the gold, all the fame, all the fortune, and all the wealth. And David cannot figure out why Baby Doll would choose those men over a broken, battered, fallen Dusty. It is called hypergamy, David. Look it up. It is the true embodiment of the great quote, "Women do not care about men's struggles. They simply wait at the finish line and bang the winners." But, God, this is so well done with how this is filmed. They go to the footage of the Dusty Flair match again, and the first big angle here is the spot where Dusty gets the 3 count on Flair, but what he doesn't see is that Baby Doll grabbed Flair's foot and put it under the bottom rope. So when Tommy Young sees it, he waves off the call. And the announcers are great here because they're talking about how Flair is confused by the whole thing. He doesn't know what's going on. So fast forward about a minute later, and that is when we get to the spot where Dusty's trying to roll over on the figure 4, but Baby Doll reaches in and helps Flair turn it back over. And at that point, Dusty is totally confused about what's going on. He's livid about the whole situation. So they do the ref bump. Both guys are teeing off on one another. And finally, the big climax. Baby Doll grabs a chair, and she goes to run in and hit Dusty over the head with it. But as Dusty dodges, he grabs the chair and runs her off. And while Dusty turns around and starts Pillmanizing Flair's leg with the head of the chair, Tommy Young catches him in the act and disqualifies him. A pure emotional outburst from Dusty here, and it backfired. Big time. And of course, after the bell, Tully runs down and starts attacking Dusty with the chair, until the babyfaces, of course, run them off. And the lasting visual of the segment is Baby Doll wrapping her arms around Tully and Flair and officially signaling to the world that she is now evil. So, well, now we're going to get an explanation for all this. We cut to Ric Flair, Baby Doll, and Bob Caudle on Worldwide to get an idea of what led to this sudden turn of events. And, well, analyzing this thing through the red pill lens, it's not really that hard to figure out, actually. Baby Doll likes rich dudes with nice cars and luxury lifestyles. She doesn't deal with losers. Dusty's a loser, so Baby Doll sought after the guys that had all the nice things. I mean, Baby Doll said it herself. Don't shoot the messenger. Just telling you like it is. She said, I'm a champion in the NWA, and if you're not a champion, you are absolutely nothing. The harsh realities of life seeping its ugly head here. And then Flair basically concluded by saying him and Baby Doll are going to ride Space Mountain so that Baby Doll did not have to lay down at night thinking about how much she did not want to fuck Dusty or Magnum. Not joking, that's essentially what she said, or what he said. And then he said, diamonds are forever, and so is Baby Doll. That is, until she was written off of television shortly after this because of the controversy surrounding her then first marriage with on-screen wrestler Sam Houston, which we won't really detail too much here for time's sake. Not that there was a whole lot to the story anyway, but yeah, this little heel run for Baby Doll in '86 didn't last all that long before she was gone, and I don't remember if she ever came back to Crockett Promotions after that. I know she went to the UWF for a brief stint about a year later before winding up in the WWF for a tryout, but if you were a big fan of Baby Doll on camera, drink it in, man, because you won't be seeing it for too long after this. So we go from that to Magnum TA versus Art Pritz. That had to be a rib. They said, well, Baby Doll really fucked over poor Magnum and Dusty. Who can we have Magnum go out and kill on television to shed off some anger? How about that Art Pritz guy? He can be a sacrificial lamb. If you really need me to tell you what happened in this match, you've obviously never seen a Magnum TA studio match before. Then we cut to the booth for a quick Paul Ellering promo, and honestly, I didn't write a whole lot down about this. He basically talked about the towns that the Road Warriors will be visiting soon, and then he told all the heel tag teams, including the Midnight Express, that the Road Warriors are going to be riding their asses in the future. And that took us back to the ring for a Road Warriors massacre on Kent Glover and Lee Peak. And normally I'm one to sit here and just tell you up front, the Road Warriors killed these two guys and move on. However, this is an instance where you have to watch this thing unfold because it might have been the single greatest massacre we've seen on any of these studio shows. There's a spot in the first 10 seconds of this match where Animal is on the floor trying to press slam Lee Peak back into the ring, but it's not one of those deals where he just power presses him through the bottom rope or something. Animal hoists the guy up overhead. He then turns and gently places Lee on the ring apron by his feet, and then he shoves Lee through the bottom rope into the ring so that Hawk can immediately grab a hold of him and start beating him up. Watching Lee go through this chain of events was a sight to behold. It was the most graceless thing you have ever seen, but holy shit was it funny. There's also a spot in this match that made my stomach churn as soon as I saw it, and even Cornette called bullshit on it. Hawk picks up Lee into an overhead press position, and while he carries him overhead to his corner to tag Animal, obviously Hawk's arms are over his head, so Animal had to tag his chest. And this counted as a legal tag. And even Cornette was like, since when is tagging the chest a legal tag? And Tony tried to justify it, but I too called bullshit. That's also where he dropped the patented line, Tony doesn't know a wrist lock from a wristwatch. Hawk ended up getting a win for his team with the running clothesline. For sure, you have to go out of your way to see this thing. It is the single best squash in the history of squashes, purely for that Lee Peak spot on the floor. So then we had a Dusty promo. Oh my God, this promo. Dusty was on a whole different level during this little tangent. The dude was on a whole other planet. He dropped some of the most hardcore, brutal lines here, including something so memorable I will never forget it until the day I die. Saying Baby Doll is a no-good Jezebel from the streets. Says for 10 months he carried her around and gave her the good life. Also, she could turn around and link arms with the Horsemen again. And this next line here. Well, here's the thing. Occasionally, there will be those studio moments where there's something too grand for me to just talk about without providing the actual audio. The editing on this thing. Absolutely legendary. Allow for me to play you something that actually aired on the TBS Superstation in the year 1986. And the way they censored this thing, I laughed so hard at this. I actually had to physically leave the room and come back to regain my composure. I was laughing so hard.
Let me tell you something, doll. It reminds me of a little thing when you called me up and say, hey, Dutch, is that your horse outside? I said, no, man. And you're too fat to ride. That's what it's all about. I got people all over this country talking about Dusty Rhodes, the American Dream, and my movement. Well, that's fine. Let this go down in history. Tell that Black United Anderson, old Anderson, Ric Flair, J.J. Dilla, Four Horsemen, your time's coming. And Big Bubba, let me tell you what, Big Bubba, they gonna find your clothes strung all over the arena, and you gonna be in most of them, Jack.
Fans don't go away. We'll be right back.
I can't even. Like, seriously, what the fuck else is there to say about it? Dusty Rhodes, man. Ain't nobody else like him. That goddamn studio crowd sitting there chanting the woo, 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 woo. Hey, we're all behind Dusty here. Every God blessed one of them. Up next, we had the Midnight Express taking on both the Mulkey brothers, to which I wrote down, oh, this will be exciting. By the way, Cornette's line here for the Eaton Condrey introductions, classic. Saying they've crippled more men than arthritis. And of course, these dudes just lost their tag straps, so they're pissed. And Ian and Condrey went into full Legion of Doom mode here with the beatdown. And Condrey didn't even take his jacket off, he was so angry. They just beat the ever-loving piss out of these two juggernauts, stomping a mud hole in them, throwing them around the ring, the whole 9 yards. And the afterbirth was even better because after Eaton won with the top rope splash, Condrey threw one of the Mulkeys out to the floor, and after Corny tried to get in his face, the Mulkey brother shoved him back, and Big Bubba wasn't having any of this jabroni's bullshit, so he threw this poor sap back into the ring and began unloading on him. ended up giving him the Boss Man Slam coming off the ropes, which I think may have been the official debut of that move. Meanwhile, you got Eaton holding back Pee Wee Anderson in the corner, trying to prevent him from getting involved. Because, Pee Wee fucking Anderson, of all people, was going to be capable of holding back Big Bubba Rogers. Yeah, I'll bet on that one. And then he sealed the deal by giving the Mulkey brother a top rope splash. Great heat angle. I can't tell if I'm saying that because it was actually a good angle or if it was just funny watching the Mulkey brothers get beaten up. And of course, they come back from commercial and they've got the officials and some of the undercard babyfaces ringside to help the Mulkey brother to the back. Really putting over that Boss Man Slam is a big deal. But, well, then they quickly turned things over to Magnum TA at the booth, who did a great babyface promo on Nikita. The kind of face promo you would want to hear after you just saw a guy lose his big championship match when the chips were down. He's not sulking. He's not bitter. He's not resentful about what happened. The fact is, Nikita is the recognized U.S. heavyweight champion, so all that means is that Magnum is on his tail to reclaim it. Says he has newfound determination to go after Nikita. He isn't embarrassed about the situation, and while Nikita can boast about scouring for new competition, he needs to keep Magnum in the back of his mind because it's fresh on Magnum's mind. After this, I thought, this would have been a great promo for Hangman Page to do after losing the world title to CM Punk a couple months ago. Or better yet, how about this past Wednesday night? Instead of sitting the show out entirely. No, instead he's drowning in his sorrows with a job order and wearing his wife's jeans on television. Wahoo McDaniel wrestled Randy Barber, and I regret to inform you, I forgot all about Wahoo McDaniel. One of those guys, when I saw him pop up on screen, I was like, oh yeah, that guy still exists. My notes simply read, Wahoo won with a phantom elbow drop. That's no joke. He legitimately went for an elbow drop on Barber, completely missed, and he still got the pin anyway. Horrible. Then we cut to the video footage of the Rock and Roll Midnight match, as promised earlier on. And we are in Philly, with where this title switch happened. The story, as told by Cornette, is that the Midnights controlled the action for well over a half hour. They're working over Robert Gibson here on the mat before he eventually made the hot tag to Ricky. And after the quick shine from Ricky, things end up breaking down. Both teams are going back and forth, getting false finishes on the other. And the big confusion comes into play here, where Eaton tries to run illegal interference, but when he goes for the pinfall, Gibson runs in and tells Tommy Young that Condrey is the legal guy. So there's all this hoopla going on with both teams. Cornette selling the bullshit story that Eaton was actually the legal guy all along. And the payoff, while the heels are double-teaming Gibson, Condrey goes to grab Ricky on the apron and yank him back into the ring, but Ricky small packages Condrey and gets the win. And of course, Cornette's irate about this whole situation, doing his best Ric Flair impersonation with ripping off the suit jacket and flipping his lid about the entire thing. And this was good. Obviously, if you know your NWA history around this period, we're headed up to Starrcade in a few months, and we all know what the big plans are for the Midnight Express. But, I was thinking about it too while I was watching this. This really showcased the greatness of the tag team scene around this period. And there was so much great rotation going on with all the top teams. It was so easy to transition guys in and out of the title picture so smoothly. The Rock and Roll Express, they came into 1986 as the champions. They lost the straps to the Midnight Express. And while Ricky and Robert spent the course of 86 dealing with their share of issues, whether it was, the Russians, Ric Flair, Ole and Arn, or some combination thereof, they were still heavily involved with the Midnight feud. And they eventually managed to win the belts back from them like they promised. And of course, that set up nicely for Ian and Condrey to step down from the title picture and really kick their program with the Road Warriors into the next gear. This is all well done. I still deem this one of the best periods, if not the single best period in the history of the wrestling business and any major wrestling organization. Not just because of the talent and the star power, but the way the tag division just flowed and the way guys that they seamlessly transitioned in and out of programs with one another. It all made sense, it all paid off well, and everyone always had a purpose with where they were going. Then we had Ronnie Garvin versus George South. Speaking of guys I almost forgot about, this was a good program for bloodbath squash matches because if you enjoy watching top guys beat the shit out of job dudes, this is the show for you. Garvin won with the knockout punch. That's all there really is to say about it. But it was also a Ronnie Garvin match, so there were a lot of chest slapping and headbutts and stomping and everything you'd come to expect out of a Ron Garvin match. Brutal. And then we had Dick Murdoch out for a show-closing promo, looking like he was about ready for his day job at State Farm. And Murdoch is absolutely disgusted with the whole baby doll situation. He talks about how Flair thinks that clothes and the luxury lifestyle make the man, when in actuality, what makes a man is the hard-working, blue-collar man in Levi's and overalls working the regular 8-to-5 day job. Tells Flair that there's a lot of boys in the back that can put on a pair of trunks and out-wrestle Flair any day of the week, up to and including Murdoch. And while he doesn't have any fancy suits or nice cars to back up what he does, he has the fighting spirit. And he's going to bring that to Flair and the Omni when they face off for the World Heavyweight title. Good old Southern redneck promo from the captain himself. And this show gets a massive thumbs up for the promo segments alone. While I joked about it earlier on, how Cornette was sort of the megastar of the year 1986, I mean, if we're actually being realistic, he's not that far off. Yeah, you still had Dusty. Yeah, you had the Horsemen. You had the Rock and Roll Express. You still had a lot of great stars, but man, even dating back as early as January or February of 86, Cornette did not get as much screen time as he had in the last month alone. Like that 86 Bash tour, I truly believe that was the catalyst that launched Corny and the Midnight Express into that top spot. Because y'all remember when they came into Crockett Promotions at the end of 85? They were doing that fucking ridiculous story with Jimmy Valiant and Ronnie Garvin dressed in drag. And now you fast forward less than a year later, and Cornette is getting the bulk of screen time every week on these studio shows. He really became a central focus by this point in 86, and it carried over for pretty much the rest of his run in the promotion until the whole Jim Herd era kind of fucked things up. But really, man, go back and watch the entire archive of NWA from January to the late summer of 86. The Baby Doll Cornette story was arguably one of the key attractions for that entire Bash tour. And I think because it was so successful, Dusty was going to milk that momentum for all it was worth. He knew that Cornette was talented, so he was going to throw him out there every week to be a heat magnet on the studio shows. And his commentary was actually valuable. It wasn't like he was just doing it for the heat. Like, the guy was a phenomenal talker. His ability to go out there and comfortably banter with Tony and David, that's what made it work. It was just something I noticed after watching this episode. I'm like, wow, Corny is all over this show. And it wasn't a bad thing. I know the guy had a reputation for overshadowing too much of the program at various points, but I certainly didn't view it that way. Not at all. Okay, then. So we will move on to World Class Championship Wrestling. This would be August 27th of the year 1983. Our opening contest was Jose Lothario versus Gentleman Chris Adams. We were reminded of Chris's recent soccer session from last week's show where he showed us his moves, for lack of better terms. I still like the idea of Mercer trying to sell us on the importance of soccer in North America. As if. Generally, I would say it was a fun opener. I will never get over Adams being able to do a back body drop takeover and landing perfectly on his feet. You know, it might seem so easy, especially when you compare it to what you see a lot of the guys do in the business today, but it is also important to remember that Chris Adams was not a small dude. The match was babyface versus babyface, but they made it work. A lot of it was back and forth. Lothario worked over Adams' back for a while. Adams made some brisk comebacks and was doing a lot of his usual flashy offense, but Lothario surprisingly held up pretty well. You know, he fed well for him. He was always in the right spot. They were totally gassed by the end, but considering they went the time limit draw, it wasn't all that shocking. Really not a whole lot to say about it beyond that, though. Cold open with a 10-minute time limit. Both guys shook hands at the end and went on their merry ways. That was followed with Kevin Von Erich doing a sit-down with Bill Mercer to talk about the recent American heavyweight title showdown between him and gorgeous Jimmy Garvin. And I'm not quite sure what venue they were at, but from the hard cam, you could look back and see the concession stand. And it is amazing to think back in the day that people would be actively watching a wrestling match take place in the ring while they are also trying to place an order for a hot dog. That is some mega multitasking skill right there. But the whole match is Kevin pretty much having his way with gorgeous Jimmy. Garvin's trying to stall and crawl out of the ring at every turn. Kevin ends up locking in the claw hold at one point. But the highlight of this entire segment, beyond a doubt, is Sunshine. She's out there on the floor having a total conniption. She's waving her purse in the air, screaming at David Manning about God knows what. Face is totally beat red. And finally, she gets on the apron to try and shield Garvin. But Kevin just says, fuck you. And he yanks them both into the ring over the top rope. Sunshine takes an amazing bump in both high heels and was essentially a blouse and a skirt. Major props to her. And Kevin's continuing to beat Garvin's ass when what should Sunshine pull out from the purse but a can of hairspray? And she gets Kevin in the face with it, which allows for Garvin to roll up Kevin with the small package to win the belt. Of course, it's also important to remember that Garvin is also bleeding like a faucet by this point. But they cut back to the desk, and Kevin basically says he wants a rematch, but he does not have any faith that Garvin will own up to his word of granting him a rematch. So now it falls in the hands of NWA management to see what they want to do. Judging how the match went down, I think there is a case to be made that a rematch would be warranted, but that's just my take. Then we had the best part of the show, easily. If not for the first minute of the segment alone before the bell even rang. The match is gorgeous Jim Garvin versus Mike Reed, but the highlight here is Garvin coming down to the ring, obviously accompanied by Sunshine, who is looking quite fine. And these two little pricks are just basking in their own glory. Whatever cliche you want to use, they were liking the smell of their own farts. You got Sunshine, who looked fantastic. She's shining up the American heavyweight belt. Garvin's just being a great troll. Did I mention Sunshine looked great? Anyhow, that's not even the best part, because I think the crowd was under the assumption that this was a title match. And they're all going crazy at first because I guess some of them thought that, of all people, Mike Reed actually stood a chance of winning the belt here. That was until they heard, this match is non-title. And they all immediately showered the building with boos. I laughed. I also laughed as the fans chanted, "Sunshine sucks." She was greatly disturbed by this. Phew. Imagine back in the day, a chant like that being controversial. So they had a match. They gave Mike Reed a little bit of shine here, but generally it was all Garvin. He ended up going over with, not making this up, a backbreaker across the knee. Quite the devastating maneuver. And of course, after the match, the fans continued with their "Sunshine sucks" chants. I did want to know too, I don't know if I mentioned it recently, but even though Sunshine was always great with Garvin, the last few shows, I've really started to notice her coming out of her shell more than usual. Like, generally, she would be great sitting at ringside and showing good facials, but, lately she's been interacting with the fans more, she's getting more involved with finishes, and she just seems so more naturally comfortable on camera than when she first started. I don't know, maybe wrestling historians would disagree on my take, but I definitely see a more lively version of Sunshine in some of these latter shows. But eventually Kevin Von Erich came down to confront Garvin, and while Garvin cowered in the corner, he tried making a move on Kevin, but he gave him a back body drop, and that was enough to send the heels packing. One backdrop. And then Kevin taunted the heels on the floor by holding up the American Heavyweight title and basically playing a game of fetch with Garvin, telling him to come in and get it if he wants it. So, yeah, it looks like they're doing one of those champion gets his belt stolen storylines, which, I don't know. I always thought those storylines were kind of dumb in wrestling, because the solution is so easy. All management needs to do is just walk up and say, "Hey, fucker, give the guy his belt back or you're going to be fined or suspended." It's not to say they're going to do an elongated version of the story, but the idea was always silly to me. Up next, we had Buddy Roberts and Kerry Von Erich. And of course, since it's a Buddy Roberts match, you basically got two main stories going on. The wrestler going for the wig almost instantly, and the fans doing the "we want the wig" chants for pretty much the entire match. And it's actually kind of the genius of doing a long-term story like this, because it almost makes Buddy Roberts matches must-see on television every week. The idea that anytime, any place, you might see somebody reveal Buddy's bald head, there's a lot of inbuilt suspense there, whether or not they actually pay it off in full, but I always liked this storyline. It was a good match, too. The other story they had playing up here was something that actually happened last week's show in the main event. If y'all remember, they had the spot at the end of the six-man tag where Buddy hit Kerry in the back of the head with his helmet, and it allowed for the heels to steal the win. So here, they had Buddy do a spot where he hit Kerry in the forehead with the helmet for the heat. I like, too, the visual of Manning trying to pat the helmet to see if he could find a gimmick inside of it, and then Buddy turns to the crowd and goes, "No. Ain't no gimmick in this here helmet. It is just padding." And the finish saw Kerry going over with the roll-up, but that immediately led to the heat angle where Michael Hayes runs in and starts lashing Kerry with the leather strap. So, booking 101 logic dictates that we might see a strap match with Kerry and Hayes at some point. Good stuff. That is, if you can get over the fact that it is yet another Kerry Von Erich Michael Hayes match. If you are already sick of these, I understand. But the featured match for the card was Bruiser Brody and the Boris Zhirkov match. Boris Zhirkov, for those of you that don't remember, was the fake Russian that Skandar Akbar hired as part of Devastation Incorporated. He also wrestled in Mid-South Wrestling around this period as well. Didn't last all that long, and if you watched his work, you could probably tell why. At least Mercer finally pronounced his name right, after having completely butchered it for the last 2 weeks. The match was very long, very boring. There was actually a period where the 5-minute mark was called, and I was convinced that I had been watching this thing unfold for about an hour. And in one of the most confusing finishing sequences I have seen on any episode of World Class, there's a spot at the end where Brody goes to dump Zerkov out to the floor. He then goes to pick up a chair, which he then uses in plain view of Bronco Lubick as he whacks Zerkov over the arm. This apparently was not a direct DQ. So Brody proceeds to then pound and pound on Zerkov for another minute. He ties him up in the ropes, hits him with a boot across the head, and then he finally gives him a knee drop off the ropes for the pin. So this was no DQ? Or were chair usages in World Class so rare back in the day it never even crossed the ref's mind to disqualify a guy for using a weapon during a sanctioned match? I couldn't tell you. Either that or Bronco just hated Russians. Fans definitely went crazy for the finish, and the last minute was pretty good once Brody just started going apeshit on Zerkov, but the chair shot to the arm was questionable. Overall, that was the show, though. Bill Mercer actually kind of summarized it pretty well when he said, "This was the night of revenge. This was world-class wrestling vengeance." I think that was a WWF pay-per-view at one point, wasn't it? Or am I confusing that with Backlash that they usually run after WrestleMania? Doesn't matter. Show was pretty good overall. Good wrestling, good angles, some fine story advancement. And the MVPs of this show continued to be Garvin and Sunshine, without a doubt. Those two, man. Two peas in a pod. Great personalities, great charisma. Always making their segments must-see parts of the show. So as we wrap things up, make sure that you come back to check out the show, especially with what we've got in store for the next couple weeks. This coming Monday, we have the NWA 74 two-night pay-per-view special that we're going to be talking about. Could end up being the last NWA event we cover for the time being, because I've been pretty down on that product as of late. The excitement level and buzz for that company just isn't there for me, or anyone for that matter. And generally, I just haven't found the weekly YouTube shows all that good or worth discussing. So unless they got something big planned for that event, I might end up passing on the NWA until I see some drastic changes creatively. We also have, for this coming Monday, as part of the Retro Review series, I promised that I was going to be talking about WWF SummerSlam 1993 from the Auburn Hills Palace in Michigan. We've been covering the Retro Raws in the lead up to the show, so now I get to go back and see just how bad I remember that pay-per-view being, because it was pretty bad from what I remember. I have not watched that show in, well over 20 years now. I mean, I've obviously seen the highlights of the infamous Luger-Yoko match for the WWF title, but watching the show from beginning to end, I don't think I've actually done that since the first time it aired. So that'll be quite the viewing experience, and it'll be all in the can for Monday. And obviously for the following weekend, we've got the AEW pay-per-view and WWE's UK pay-per-view that we'll be talking about. And I will go more into detail about those this coming week. The Friday podcast, nothing is going to change there for right now. We'll be sticking with the regular Dynamite reviews along with the NWA Studio and World Class reviews. I think for next week's Dynamite show, I might try to throw in a pay-per-view predictions preview like I did with the last couple AEW pay-per-view specials. Kind of all depends on how much that card is really even worth discussing. I mean, as of this recording, there isn't a whole lot that we know about that's going down on that show. Christ, we don't even know what the fucking main event is. And after that garbage segment they just did with Mox and Punk on Dynamite, God only knows what they'll do. So, I honestly need to see if it's even worth doing a card preview. If not, we'll just recap the show when it airs and move on from there. We will see. Until then, take care, all. Peace.